Hello world! Welcome and welcome back to the channel, where today's video has been brought to you by the letter D for dumpster fire. This will be a summary of my digital art journey, in which I draw in 3 different apps on my iPad that have all been my bread and butter art programs in varying points in my life. But I definitely didn't start this video with that concept, and I realized during the editing process that this is going to be an incoherent mess unless I made some huge changes partway through. I'll explain in more detail later on in the process, but for now, let's start! My intention for this video was to draw the same character in the same pose 3 different times across all the apps I'll be featuring today. There won't be a background or particle effects or anything fancy like that, just a person on a canvas. We'll be going in order, beginning at the program I currently use and ending with my very first digital art software, starting with Procreate. This has been my daily driver for the past 2 years, so I've gotten really used to its features and comfortable drawing on it. For the character I'll be drawing, I decided to go with 𝚘𝚘𝚘𝚘 as a tribute to Emi Shinohara, her original seiyuu from the first Sailor Moon anime, who unfortunately passed away earlier this month. The pose I had her in was kind of a loose redraw of one of the promotional images for her SH Figuarts action figure. I actually own all of the original figures for the inner and outer Senshi base forms that first came out back in 2014 and 2015. Except for Sailor Pluto, she's the only one I'm still missing. And if I was thinking ahead, I could have dug out my Sailor Jupiter figure and used her as light reference. Because I have no shelf space to spare, pretty much all of my posable scale figures are in storage right now, and they're impossible for me to get to without me eviscerating my entire closet, so I hope you can forgive me for taking the lazy way out. Since I'm drawing Makoto in her Senshi form 3 different times, part of me wishes I could have depicted her in each of her transformation upgrades, starting with her base form, then her Super Sailor Jupiter form, and finally her Eternal Sailor Jupiter form, but unfortunately this wasn't something I was able to do since it didn't really mesh with the original video idea I created all of this artwork for. So talking a little bit about my Procreate drawing journey, I first started using it back in August of 2022, and it's still my go-to digital art program to this day. I'm a little embarrassed to show my first and most recent drawings I did on it, but my very first piece was of my Ubu dumpster comfort chip, which started out with me testing the brushes for the first time, but then evolved outside my control. At the time of me creating this artwork for this video, my most recent piece was this silly little pizza tower doodle that I probably put a little too much effort into, but prior to that, my most recent drawing I made seriously was my WAP Trio crossover. I specify at the time of me creating this artwork because after I finished it, I've since made another Procreate doodle where I designed one of my OCs, which I'm going to keep a secret from now because it's for an upcoming project. Procreate isn't the first iPad app I've ever drawn in, but of all the ones I've used, it's definitely been the most fun. Even though there are a bunch of features that I missed from other drawing programs, it still brings a lot to the table and just keeps getting better over time. Who else is super excited for the 5.4 update that's coming out later this year? I don't know what I can say for Procreate that hasn't already been said countless times from other users. It's a fantastic app and its value just keeps increasing over time, especially since it's a one-time purchase on the App Store with free updates. I only wish I had a better iPad so I could use it to its full potential. Honestly, there's probably not a whole lot I can share as far as it relates to my drawing experience in Procreate because of how late I got into it and how smoothly I adapted to it compared to the other programs I'll be talking about later on in the video. I've either been using a specific program for a really long period, so I have a concrete vision of my art progression as I drew with it, or I used it for a time but then didn't pick it back up again after a while, so there's more of a narrative compared to Procreate, which is basically like, I really like this app, then I found out you can import ABR files, and now I like it even more. 5 stars. I've never used Procreate Pocket or Procreate Dreams, but especially now that we're getting this 5.4 update, I'm really hoping that Dreams will also continue to get better over time and that the developers will take all of the critiques people have had with it into consideration to bring it up to par with Procreate's current level of quality. Random fact, Sailor Jupiter is actually my mom's favorite Senshi. I remember when the Viz Media dub of the Sailor Moon R movie was first announced, she was really enthusiastic about watching it in the theater despite barely knowing anything about the franchise, and she identified a lot with Makoto because they're both tomboys who enjoy gardening, cooking, and baking. When the news first dropped about Emi Shinohara's passing, I really didn't know how to react at first. It's like we barely had enough time to recover from James Earl Jones's passing, and then literally the very next day we lost another iconic voice talent. And on Ami's birthday, no less, that's too much. I admit I don't keep up with trending news, but as far as I'm aware, most of the Japanese seiyuu for the original anime are still around, which just makes Shinohata's passing even more shocking. The only other prominent Sailor Moon seiyuu who've departed this life that I can think of off the top of my head are Kazuyuki Sogabe, who played Kunzite, and Jiho Niyama, who was Sailor Starfighter. If I'm wrong, please don't tell me in the comments because I don't know if I can take it. Everyone, help me form a protective circle around the rest of the voice cast. Ironically, I don't have a lot of experience drawing the senshi. Pleated skirts and sailor collars are the bane of my existence, but for this video, my only other option was to draw a character whose design I've memorized, and nobody wants to watch me draw Hifumi Yamada 3 times in a row. On that note, our Procreate artwork is now complete. Moving on to our second drawing app, we have Ibis Paint, which was actually my previous daily driver when I first bought my iPad and Apple Pencil setup, starting in February 2020 and lasting until I finally caved and joined the Procreate cult. Unfortunately, I haven't kept track of what my first and most recent drawings were in Ibis Paint, so I can't show them here, but I still occasionally use it in some capacities, mostly by importing PSDs of comics I started in Procreate so I can finish them after hitting my layer limit. So, I assumed that I would be able to pick up drawing in this app again really easily, you know, like riding a bike, you never forget. But oh boy, was I humbled very quickly. Off camera, I spend way more time than I would like to admit just scrolling through the brush library, trying to find one that was actually comfortable to use and messing around with their settings before eventually settling on one that still didn't feel all that great. I don't know what's wrong with my pressure sensitivity, but I just couldn't get the brush to taper the way I wanted or change width with more force applied to the pen, so that really made sketching and inking feel pretty clunky. Speaking of applying pressure, I kept having a problem where my color picker would randomly activate in the middle of me drawing a line, which was something I've never experienced in other drawing apps I've used, and it was so annoying. Maybe that's my problem. I'm too spoiled by Procreate and now it's really hard for me to go back to drawing in other programs because I'm still using the default settings. Although that's something I've felt about drawing in Ibis Paint for a while now. It's a little hit or miss for me, and I find that I have a hard time getting consistent results when looking at the art I make in it compared to what I can draw in a different software. I don't know, maybe that's just a reflection of where I was with my art at the time, or maybe I'm just really weird because there isn't anything Ibis Paint can do that other drawing apps can't do, but for whatever reason, I feel like it just holds me back, and I wish I knew why that was. I guess different people just vibe with different materials. For me, Ibis Paint definitely fulfilled its purpose for a time, but it just didn't really click for me in the long run. I do feel like it's one of the art tools I've had the least amount of first-hand experience with, and I remember there being a really big learning curve when I first started using it, which either could have been me not feeling like this app was a right fit for me, or trying to adjust to drawing on a screen tablet, which was definitely a surprising thing to experience because I thought it would just feel like drawing traditionally, so I wasn't expecting to have so much difficulty at first. That being said, I feel a deep sense of gratitude towards Ibis Paint since for several months it was my only method of drawing digital art after my old computer died on me back in September of 2020, and I'm really glad this app exists. It was where I first started working on my webcomic, this is a thing that happened, and also where I did the vast majority of my artwork for my charity scene Cookie Jar, some of which I'm still really proud of to this day. So one major point Ibis Paint has in its favor compared to other free drawing apps, it's how much it's tailored towards making comics and manga as well as illustrations. Unfortunately, I've never fully utilized these features outside of making for Coma, but there's a surprisingly robust selection of features like a text tool with a bunch of different fonts, screen tone filters, a binding guide for comic pages, panel and word balloon creation tools, and a bunch of different free assets that you can use for props, backgrounds, or special effects. I could be wrong since I've never used this software myself, but I think Medibang is also geared towards comic creators as well, and it's also free. So if you're an iPad artist who has a hard time trying to make comics and drawing programs that weren't really made for this kind of work, consider giving one of these apps a try. Another thing I really appreciate about Ibis Paint is that by default it shows your color history, which is a feature Procreate limits to higher end iPad models, and here made the rendering process for this piece really convenient. So for every subsequent drawing I did of Sailor Jupiter, instead of using my original reference image to base my picture on, I just used my first drawing I did in Procreate as my reference, which I don't think was a very good idea. I wasn't trying to be a stickler about keeping to the same proportions and making all of the Jupiters look exactly the same with no variances whatsoever, but I do feel like she got progressively squishier and more chibi-ified from one app after the other. I do like how they turned out. They have character, and I think on their own they look pretty decent. paints. The color temperature definitely took a 180 turn in Ibis Paint compared to Procreate, starting very warm and ending up very cold. I'm more accustomed to selecting my colors from a swatch rather than through the color wheel. It just feels more precise and less overloading for me, but Ibis Paint's default color palettes are absolutely hideous, so I had to resort to the color wheel, and this is what came of it. I feel like just going by color, the Procreate piece has a similar feeling to the colored illustrations in the manga, and the Ibis Paint piece feels more like the 90s anime. Oh, speaking of Sailor Moon, how many of you have seen the Cosmos movies yet? I am a little disappointed in myself because I've seen every new installment of Sailor Moon Crystal on the day that it launched, but I'm still behind on the last two movies despite waiting for them to be officially released outside of Japan for so long, just because my relationship with Netflix isn't the same as it used to be. It's weird because I already know what's going to happen because I've read the manga, but I'm still trying to avoid spoilers and go in as blind as possible. Even so, I couldn't resist listening to Tsuki no Hana beforehand, and yeah, I absolutely love it. I actually wanted to draw some fan art for the occasion, but lost track of time and wasn't able to do so once the official worldwide release happened, but it's fine, I'm still gonna make the fan art either way. At this point of the recording process, I started experiencing some really frustrating technical difficulties that made creating this artwork unnecessarily complicated. I don't know if you noticed it in the video since it only showed up for a split second, but from time to time I would get an error message from Ibis Paint telling me that my iPad had run out of storage and it was no longer possible for me to continue editing my file before kicking me out to the apps gallery menu. Thus began a tedious cycle where every time this happened I would have to stop recording, export said recording from my photo gallery to my folder on the cloud where I was keeping my project file for this video, then after it was fully backed up, return to the video gallery and move it to the recycle bin before deleting it from the system altogether. Because I've already been experiencing issues with my iPad crashing while drawing on Procreate, in an attempt to stay ahead of this problem, I had set an alarm on my phone and would only draw and record those sessions for a few short bursts at a time, which meant that I was having to do all of this nonsense after every 5 minutes. I was afraid of technical issues happening if I tried to use the screen recorder function on my iPad, but I didn't predict it would be this bad. How the heck was I able to get this video done? Speaking of getting things done, that wraps up my Ibis Paint drawing of Sailor Jupiter. Woo! Also, I don't want to make screen recorded videos on my iPad again for a long time. Our third and final drawing up is just around the corner, but before we get to that part of the video, I wanted to acknowledge some other digital drawing apps I've used in the past that I unfortunately wasn't able to feature here. These will be our honorable mentions. Photoshop. Even for a one-off video, I don't want to touch anything that's been made by Adobe anymore, and I also know that the iPad app absolutely sucks. Other options that could have filled in Photoshop's place were Photopea and Affinity Designer 2, but I haven't really used any of these programs in any meaningful way, so at that point it kind of felt like cheating. Paint Tool 𝚙. Obviously this is a Windows-only program, but there is still the possibility of casting it onto my iPad, which again felt like cheating. Plus it's literally unusable on a touchscreen, there's no pressure sensitivity at all, and touch gestures do absolutely nothing. And those were our honorable mentions. Last but not least, maybe, we'll be ending this video with Clip Studio Paint, which I've been using since back when it was still called Manga Studio, starting with Manga Studio Debut 4 and jumping to Manga Studio 5. These two sketches were the very first digital drawings I ever made when I first got 4 debut, with the first being dated at July 6, 2011, and the second one being drawn a day later, and my most recent drawing being my big smoothie a la mode piece that I drew for my speed paint. Now would be a good time to mention my original plans I had for this video that I alluded to in my intro. So my toxic trait is thinking I have way more time to complete a task than I actually do, and for my last video I grossly underestimated how quickly I would be able to finish my Tokyo Mimi artwork and only got it done and uploaded in time for Tuesday by the skin of my teeth. Due to technical specifications, I had to draw it from my desktop using Clip Studio Paint, and the entire time I was working on it I kept thinking, geez, this is taking forever. If I was drawing this on Procreate, I would have been done by now. This had been on my mind long enough that I eventually wanted to put my hypothesis to the test by creating the exact drawing in 3 different iPad apps to see if it really would be faster compared to drawing on my PC. So when I draw on my desktop, I use my iPad as a drawing tablet using a program called Easy Canvas, but because my Wi-Fi signal isn't strong enough for me to maintain a connection in wireless mode, I had to draw with my iPad plugged directly into my computer as opposed to a proper charger, which is kind of inconvenient since Easy Canvas is a huge battery vampire, so I was only able to draw for about 45 45 minutes at a time before my iPad completely ran out of juice. To make matters worse, my drawing process was so uncharacteristically slow that at the end of one of those 45-minute sessions, all I got done was the line art for one of Ichigo's eyes or half of Lettuce's bangs. I have no idea why I was incapable of working at my normal pace for that illustration, since I was coming off a streak of artwork I put out these past few weeks and months, all of which were drawn in Procreate, where on average my track time wouldn't even go into the double digits of hours spent. So it was definitely an unpleasant surprise to start working on my Tokyo Mew Mew fan art and realize I wouldn't be able to replicate that same kind of speed I had before. I didn't even record my entire process since I had to finish the line art in flat colors off screen, and even then I still ended up with 16 hours of footage. But yeah, the test to see if I would be faster drawing on my iPad than on my desktop, it ended up falling apart really quickly. One of the biggest mistakes I made was that my control for the experiment was my first drawing I did in Procreate, when I should have first drawn the picture on Clip Studio Paint's desktop app to make it a more accurate comparison, and even if I had done that, I would have gotten my answer right away as to whether or not I really did draw faster one setup over another, so drawing the same picture in other iPad apps would have been completely unnecessary. I think what I should have done was try to redraw my Mew the Alamo piece on my iPad as best as I could to make it a more fair comparison, but since I already have my benchmark for how long it takes for me to complete a fully rendered illustration on Procreate versus the artwork from my previous video, I felt any kind of finished drawing would have been a fair test. So yeah, that's why I had to change the premise for this video at the last minute, because my original one just didn't hold up. This is why I kept Sailor Jupiter in the exact same outfit in every program I drew her in, rather than depicting her transformation upgrades, because I didn't want the time I spent drawing all those differences in her costume to affect how long it would take me to finish each piece. For anyone who's curious about how long it took me to make all the artwork I drew for this video, I'll put that information up on screen now. I don't know, maybe the stress of trying to get that Tokyo Mew Mew video done on time fried my brain or something, because this was not well thought out. Just as a quick heads up, my video upload schedule will be slightly different in October, but it'll go back to normal at the beginning of November. For all of you who have been keeping up with my videos about my old web series, TCU Day is just around the corner, and I want to use this opportunity to finish the animation memes I originally intended to post in honor of the 10th anniversary celebration last year, but wasn't able to due to time constraints. To make things easier for myself, I decided to clear next month's upload schedule of any videos that I won't already be making for my October 10th release date. For the past month, I've been consistently maintaining a Tuesday upload schedule for my videos, and I want to stick to that schedule for the foreseeable future, but if all goes according to plan, then you'll get 5 videos from me in the month of October, which is more than double my every 2 Tuesdays plan. So my history with my previous art programs I featured here is a little convoluted, because in a way my reasons for choosing Ibis Paint and Procreate as my main apps are connected in some way or another to Clip Studio Paint. After I spent all that money buying an iPad, Apple Pencil, and folio case, I really wanted a free program to draw in, so I went with Ibis Paint. I had been on the fence about Procreate for a really long time, and there were a bunch of features it had that I really liked, such as being able to create folders in your gallery and the automatic shape and line art tools. But I really didn't want to give up that connectivity that Ibis Paint had with Clip Studio Paint, and at the time I felt like it did everything I needed it to do. What finally pushed me off the fence was when the 2.0 update rolled around and Clip Studio Paint announced their new subscription billing model, and I think it was within that same day that I went ahead and bought Procreate out of spite. If I absolutely had to, then I wouldn't be opposed to buying a perpetual version. It's just that I'm waiting to see what new features get added over time so I can get as much bang for my buck on one purchase. But I've been so unhappy with these new update announcements lately. They just feel too much like quantity over quality. Technically, this is my first drawing on the app version of Clip Studio Paint, as there are 2 apps for this version you can download for your iPad, one being the tablet version and the other being the phone version. The tablet version of Clip Studio Paint is really just a demo, because while you do have access to most if not all of the different functions on offer, by default you're restricted to doodle mode, which prohibits you from exporting or saving your project in any capacity outside of taking a screenshot, and the only way to use the program fully is to either sign up for a free trial that you can only use once, or pay a monthly subscription fee. Those are basically your only 2 options. However, the free version of Clip Studio Paint's phone app does have saving functionality, while putting you on a 30-hour time limit per month that replenishes on the first of each month. And fortunately, you actually can download the phone app on your tablet. It's not perfect though. If you're drawing with an Apple Pencil, then you're not going to get any pressure sensitivity because those only work on iPads and not iPhones, but at least the pen itself is still pretty smooth, so it kind of feels like drawing with the 4-pack line pen that's offered by default. In a perfect world, I think they would give users of the tablet version the option of either making a one-time purchase, having the same time limit as the phone version, or allowing anyone who owns a license for the desktop software to add their tablet as a second drawing device and access the full version that way. Despite everything, I don't see myself giving up on Clip Studio Paint. Even though Procreate is probably my most likely candidate for replacing it altogether, I would still end up missing Clip Studio a lot. I also still want to try and make the phone version work for me. I could see myself using it in the same way I use Ibis Paint to finish my Procreate art, and since I still have full access to my Clip Studio cloud, it definitely helps make files more manageable. Also, coloring this drawing felt so good. It was so satisfying and magical to be able to use the enclose and fill tool, along with dragging my pen across the canvas to fill multiple sections of line art at once rather than just having to color drop each area individually, and I was genuinely sad when it had to end. Of all the Sailor Jupiters I drew for this video, I think the proportions on the Clip Studio version turn out the worst, but compared to the Ibis Paint one, the colors feel a lot more harmonious. Although as far as overall favorite goes, that first one I did in Procreate is still my pick. Let me know which of the 3 pieces I made for this video you like the best. Also, if you're a digital artist who draws on a smart tablet, what's your go-to drawing app and why? If you're locked into Ibis Paint, then I respect you, and I wish I was more like you. So that's it for this foray into my digital art history. Let me know what you thought of this video, if I was able to save it for my original idea, or if it still ended up being a hot mess before I go ahead and shut it down. Make sure to get boba cats and pats, snacks, and playtime before you log out, and head to the description of this video to find links for every other corner of cyberspace I'm on. Remember that there's no Tuesday uploads for all of October, and regular bi-weekly uploads will resume the following month. Thanks for letting me chat with you, and until next time, see you on November 5th!